They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But when the man who shattered my world stood at my door, broke, desperate, and begging, I realized karma had already done the work for me. Now the question wasn't about forgiveness. It was about whether I'd save him or watch him fall. Before we dive into this story, if you love tales of karma, redemption, and powerful women reclaiming their worth, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. 5 years ago, I was invisible. Not literally, of course, but in the way that Black women in tech often are. Brilliant, capable, overqualified, and somehow always overlooked. My name is Naomi Crawford, and the day I opened my apartment door to find Donovan Pierce standing there, I thought I was hallucinating. This man, this tech billionaire, whose face had been on magazine covers, whose algorithm had revolutionized data security, was standing in my doorway, looking like he'd crawled through hell. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and his hands were actually shaking. He said my name like a prayer, like I was his last hope. And maybe I was. I slammed the door in his face, locked it, walked away, but he knocked again, softly this time, and said 5 words that stopped me cold. Naomi, I have nowhere else to go. I stood there, my hand on that doorknob, my heart pounding, and I was transported back 7 years to the moment this nightmare began. I was 26 when I first met Donovan Pierce. I was working as a data analyst at a startup called Velocity Tech, and we were drowning. Great ideas, terrible execution, no money. Then Donovan's venture capital firm swept in like a rescue team. He was 34, charismatic in that Silicon Valley way, where confidence and vision blur together into something hypnotic. During his first visit to our office, he didn't talk to the CEO, he talked to me. I'd been working on something I called the Transparency Protocol, an algorithm that could secure data while maintaining ethical oversight. It was revolutionary, but my bosses didn't understand it. Donovan did. Within 5 minutes of looking at my work, his eyes lit up. He said, "This isn't just good. This is going to change everything." And for the first time in my career, someone saw me, really saw me. For the next 6 months, Donovan was everywhere. He'd show up at the office specifically to work with me. Late-night sessions turned into dinners. Dinners turned into conversations that had nothing to do with work. He told me about growing up poor in Detroit, about building his first computer from scrap parts, about wanting to create technology that actually helped people instead of exploiting them. I believed every word. When he kissed me for the first time in my tiny apartment after I'd cooked him dinner, I knew it was complicated. He was technically my boss. He was 8 years older. He moved in circles I'd only read about. But he made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. He'd trace his fingers along my face and say, "You're different, Naomi. Everyone else in this industry is just chasing money. You actually want to build something meaningful." I fell in love with him, completely, stupidly, irreversibly in love. And that's exactly what he was counting on. 6 months into our relationship, Donovan invited me to the Tech Innovation Gala. It was one of those events where billionaires pretend to care about progress while drinking $1,000 champagne. I wore a dress I'd saved 3 months to buy. I felt beautiful. I felt like I belonged. I was standing by the bar when I heard Donovan's voice carrying across the room. He was surrounded by investors, and he was talking about the Transparency Protocol, my Transparency Protocol, but he wasn't mentioning my name. He was saying things like my revolutionary approach and my vision for ethical data security and the algorithm I developed. I stood there frozen, listening to him take credit for 18 months of my work, my late nights, my innovation. When I confronted him in a private hallway, my hands were shaking. I said, "Donovan, that's my algorithm. You know it's mine. Why didn't you mention me?" And the man I loved looked at me with eyes colder than ice and said, "Naomi, you work for my company. Anything you create using my resources belongs to me. That's how the real world works." I threatened to go public. I told him I'd tell everyone the truth. That's when he pulled out his phone and played a recording. Us in bed, me explaining the finer points of the algorithm. He'd been recording our most intimate moments. He smiled, actually smiled, and said, "If you try to claim this work, I'll tell everyone you were trying to steal company secrets. I have timestamps, documentation, and your voice describing proprietary information in a personal setting." Who do you think they'll believe? A respected investor or a junior analyst with an axe to grind? I felt my entire world collapse. This man I'd trusted with my body, my mind, my heart, he'd been using me all along. Every conversation, every touch, every whispered promise was just him extracting what he needed. I was a resource to be mined and discarded. Within a week, I was fired for performance issues. Within a month, I couldn't get an interview anywhere in tech. Donovan's network was vast, and he'd quietly destroyed my reputation. I heard through friends that I wasn't the first. There'd been at least 2 other women of color, brilliant engineers he'd gotten close to, stolen from, and erased. It was his pattern, his system, and it worked. I lost my apartment. I moved back to my grandmother's house. In the neighborhood I'd fought so hard to escape. I worked retail, restaurant jobs, anything I could find. And I watched from the sidelines as Donovan's company went public using my algorithm. He became a billionaire while I was counting change to buy groceries. The injustice of it consumed me like acid. For 2 years, I was a ghost of myself. Depression wrapped around me like chains. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. My grandmother would sit beside me and say, "Baby, he took your work, but he can't take your mind. What you created once, you can create again." But I didn't believe her. I felt broken beyond repair. Then one night, at my lowest point, working a closing shift at a coffee shop, a young black girl came in. She was maybe 16, laptop covered in coding stickers. She ordered hot chocolate and asked if she could stay to work on her programming assignment. I watched her struggle with a problem I could solve in my sleep. I hesitated, then sat down and helped her. Her face when she understood the solution, that pure joy of discovery, it woke something up inside me. I started coding again, just an hour a day at first, at the public library, then 2 hours, then 4. I built something new, something better than the transparency protocol. I called it the Guardian System, an ethical data framework that didn't just secure information, it gave users complete control over their digital footprint. It was everything Donovan's version wasn't: transparent, user-focused, incorruptible. I worked night shifts stocking shelves and coded during the day. I lived on instant noodles and ambition. I bootstrapped my company with $5,000 biz I'd saved and incorporated under a pseudonym. I called it Sentinel Solutions, and I kept my face completely out of the press. I learned from Donovan's playbook, but I used it to build something with integrity. It took 3 years, but Sentinel started winning contracts. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. My system was superior because it was built on principles instead of theft. Companies loved it. They loved the transparency, the ethics, the innovation. And slowly, quietly, I started taking Donovan's clients. I poached his talent too, offering better culture, actual credit for work, and leadership opportunities. Tech blogs started calling Sentinel the ethical alternative to Pierce Technologies. I watched his market share drop month after month. His board started asking questions. Investors got nervous. And the beautiful irony, he had no idea his biggest competitor was the woman he'd destroyed. That brings us back to my doorway, 5 years after the betrayal. I opened the door again, and Donovan stumbled in. He looked at my apartment, modest but beautiful, filled with art and books and life, and he started crying. Actual tears from a man I'd never seen show real emotion. He told me everything. His company had collapsed. The algorithm, my algorithm, had fatal flaws he didn't understand because he hadn't actually created it. When the system failed spectacularly, taking down several major clients, The lawsuit started. During discovery, other victims came forward, women who'd been used and discarded, their work stolen. The pattern became public. Investors fled. His wife left him. He filed for bankruptcy. And then he said the words I never thought I'd hear. "I was following your company, Sentinel. It took me months to realize it was you. You're the genius, Naomi. You always were. I stole your work, your trust, your future, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He looked up at me, broken and desperate. "I'm asking for a job, any job. You're the only one who can save me." I sat there looking at this man who'd been my whole world, who'd shattered me so completely I'd wanted to disappear. Part of me wanted to make him suffer, to hire him and parade him around as the cautionary tale he deserved to be. Part of me saw the poetic justice in it. But then I looked around my apartment, at the life I'd built from nothing, and I realized something profound. I didn't need revenge. Karma had already handled that beautifully. I told Donovan I wouldn't hire him, not because I hated him, but because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I said, "You taught me that my value isn't tied to your validation or your apology. You took credit for my work, but you also freed me to build something you never could, a company with actual integrity." I wrote him a check, $5,000, the exact amount I'd started with. I said, "This isn't forgiveness, Donovan. This is me choosing peace over power games. Take this and start over somewhere else. Become someone different. But you can't do that here." As he stood to leave, I told him one more truth. One of his other victims, a woman named Trinity Baptiste, had reached out to me 3 years ago. Together, we'd built a quiet network supporting women of color in tech. We funded projects, mentored young engineers, and created opportunities that didn't require us to sacrifice our dignity. 3 of those women now worked for me. Donovan's downfall wasn't just karma, it was collective action. It was women refusing to stay invisible. I said, "You didn't just destroy one woman's trust. You created an army, and we're just getting started." After he left, I stood at my window watching the city lights. I thought about the girl I was 7 years ago, so desperate to be seen that I ignored every red flag. I thought about the woman I became in the wreckage, stronger, clearer, unbreakable. This journey cost me years of my life, my peace, almost my sanity. But it gave me something Donovan could never take: absolute certainty in my own worth. Second chances aren't about the people who hurt you. They're about who you choose to become after the hurt. I didn't need Donovan's validation, his money, or his apology. I needed to prove to myself that I could rise from ashes and build something beautiful. And I did. The best revenge wasn't destroying him. It was becoming undeniable. If this story moved you, reminded you of your own strength, or showed you that karma truly exists, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, because we're telling more stories of people who rose from the ashes. And remember, your setback is just the setup for your comeback. Drop a comment telling me, would you have hired him? Let's talk about it.